So you're going to feel really comfortable with the test. There's going to be no surprises. So the first thing you're going to see is a problem like this. Now, careful, because a lot of people think this is properties of exponents, but notice, and it kind of is, but we can do this easier. This is really order of operations, because do you see how it's all numbers, no variables? Well, this is just simplifying. Remember, order of operations, you have to simplify in parentheses first. So we have 4 times 5 plus 3, which is 8. We need to do that. 8 to the negative 2, and then it's all over 7 minus 2. You see how I'm just simplifying in the parentheses first? So 7 minus 2 is 5. Now remember, it's please excuse my dear Aunt Sally. So parentheses, check, exponents, we haven't fixed yet. Right here, we need to do that. 2 different ways you can do this. If you have a graphing calculator, you can literally type into your calculator raised to the negative 2 power. It's going to give you a decimal. You have to be able to change it back to a fraction. So you hit math, enter, enter. That's 1 over 64. So you can do it using your calculator, or you can just say, I know I have to flip anything with a negative exponent, correct? To the bottom. So I take this, flip it down. So we have a 4 on top. On bottom we have a 5, and now an 8 to the positive 2 on bottom. Does everybody understand? Yep, still in parentheses, 8 to the positive 2 now. So now we'll do that, which 8 squared means 8 times 8, which is 64. So we have 4 on top, and on bottom we have 5 times 64. So we're going to do that. 5 times 64 on bottom. 320, so we have a 4 on top and a 320. Now you always take, that is our answer, take your calculator, let's all practice. Do 4 divided by 320. You get a decimal. You hit the math key. Enter, enter. We get 1 over 80. So that would have been our final answer. So once again, that's going to be like the first thing you see on the test. So let's look at one more real quick. Over here, there's no variables, so this is just order of operations. Let's simplify in our parentheses first. 2 minus 1 is 1, right? Let's do that in our calculator. 1 raised to the negative 3. 1, right? 1 raised to the negative 3 is 1. Okay, sorry, I'm getting a little ahead of myself. But anyways, continuing with our parentheses here, 4 minus 3 is also 1. So we have negative 3 times 1 to the negative 3. I want to just write that one more time. And then 9 times 1. So exponents first. Remember that that's just, we can flip it down. 1 to the positive 3, right? So on top we have negative 3. On bottom we have 9 times 1 times 1 times 1 times 1, correct? Which is just 9. So this would simplify to be, careful, don't say negative 3. 1 over 3, correct? Negative 1/3. Okay, that's the first problem. You'll see it on the test. Simplify. Which part? I don't know. So we always simplify in our parentheses first, right? So then we have 1 raised to the negative 3 power. Okay. We always flip anything with a negative exponent over a fraction, right, to make it positive. So on bottom, we brought it down 1 to the positive 3. So we still had a negative 3 on top, nothing else. 9. Then this became a 1, 4 minus 3. So 9 times 1. And then we have times 1 cubed, which is just 1 times 1 times 1. Okay. Yeah. Okay. Good question. Hey, looking at this one, there are going to be hard properties of exponents. This looks a lot harder than it is. What you always do with properties of exponents, simplify the top, simplify the bottom, then simplify the whole thing. So let's just focus on the top here. And we always simplify inside parentheses first. So, guys, we can reorder this. That's 3 times 2 times, do you see how I'm just reordering it? Times x to the first, right in your powers of 1, times x to the negative 3, times y squared. You should move over here so I'm not in your way. Sorry. Okay, so that's so far good, right? Now don't forget it's raised to the second power. I'm going to keep simplifying inside the parentheses. This is on top. So when you multiply numbers, you multiply numbers. What's 3 times 2? 6. x to the first times x to the negative 3. When you multiply, you add, which is x to the negative 2, correct? And then we have a y squared. And that's all raised to the second power. Now, do not miss this on the test, guys. 6 is to the first power, correct? So you got to distribute that 2 through to the powers. A lot of people go 2 times 6. That's wrong. It's not 2 times 6. It's 6 squared. 1 times 2. So I'm still simplifying the top. I have a 6 squared. I have an x to the raise of power to a power, and you multiply negative 4 and y to the 4th, correct? We're all good? You're understanding it? Yeah. Now on bottom, we can't simplify anything in parentheses. Okay, we're good there. We write in our powers of 1 though, and it's all raised to the negative 2. So I'm going to distribute that negative 2 through to our powers, raising powers to a power. You multiply the powers. Once again, do not go 3 times negative 2. That's wrong. So we have 3 raised to the negative 2 power, x to the negative 2, and y to the positive 6. Is everybody comfortable to there? So then you'd say, okay, with numbers, you simply simplify it. That's all you do. Like, don't divide those and do weird things. What is 6 squared on top? 36, right? So then on bottom, we have 3 to the negative 2. Won't we need to flip that over a fraction? So 3 squared on top. And it's times, right? So times 3 squared, which is 9. I'm going to draw my line here. When you divide the same base, then you subtract, right? So we're subtracting the top from the bottom. So be really careful. If you need to, go off to the side and say, okay, I'm doing the top, which is negative 4. Go minus. Now look at the bottom. Negative 2. Do you see how a lot of people miss the minusing and negative? So it's plus 2, right? Minusing a negative makes it positive. So negative 4 plus 2 is negative 2. So that's on top right now. We have x to the negative 2. Does everybody see how I use properties of exponents to have all my x's get together? Yeah. Now 4 minus 6 is negative 2, right? For y's, 4 minus 6 is negative 2. So we have y to the negative 2. Now you'll look and say, okay, am I simplified all the way? No. What's 36 times 9? 324. So I'm going to draw a line again. Sorry, over here. So this is going to be my final answer. 36 times 9 is 324. Isn't that on top? Now we have x to the negative 2. Don't we need to flip that part over a fraction? So when we flip it, guys, it becomes positive. That's a common mistake. People flip it and write the negative again. That's not why we flipped it. So x to the positive 2. If this was positive, y to the negative 2, we'd leave it, but it's not. So we're going to flip that down as well. So now it's y to the positive 2. And we're done. If your final answer has 2 x's, you haven't gone all the way. If it has 2 y's, you haven't gone all the way, right?
Good morning.
I know, they're so good. They are dedicated. I told them brownie points. Okay, bye. Okay, look at this one. We didn't practice this one very good. Okay, is everybody feeling a little bit more confident with properties of exponents? You sure? Wait a minute. I swear I had one more I was going to do, but I guess not. Okay, sweet. We'll maybe do another one at the end if you feel like you need it. Okay, so you've got it, guys. You have got it. It's all, like on the test, I'm looking at it right here. The properties of exponents look big and nasty, but what do? We simplify the top, simplify the bottom, simplify the whole thing. Okay. Here we go. Simplifying this, we break it down into its factors. So 4 times 2, correct? 4 is 2 times 2. Now x to the 6 means we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 x's. Do you remember doing this last year? And then y to the 7 means we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 y's. Now look, this is a square root, so we're pulling out groups of 2. You can only leave the house if there's 2 of them. So we'll pull out a 2. That 2's got to stay, correct? Don't double dip. 4's not there anymore. We rewrote 4 as those. We pull out an x. We pull out an x. We pull out an x. Correct? Pull out a y. Pull out a y. Pull out a y. Oh, that y's got to stay. So anything I circled is going to come on the outside of the house. They leave in groups of 2 since it's a square root. So we have a 2. We have an x. an X, an X, and a Y, and a Y, and a Y. And that's on the outside, correct? Left underneath is 2 and a Y. So left underneath the square root is 2Y. Anything on the outside, you multiply together. So on the outside, we'll have 2x cubed, correct? X times X times X. When you multiply, you add, right? There's 3 X's. And then Y cubed, 1, so Y cubed. And then left under the house was 2Y. This would be our final answer. Good? So if this would have been a cube root, we would have pulled out groups of 3, but it's going to be a square root. So groups of 2. Okay, oh yeah, this is another one of properties of exponents. Okay, looking at it on the test, this is going to be the very first part of the test. Once again, you're going to say to yourself, it looks big and scary, but I'm going to simplify the top, I'm going to simplify the bottom, and then simplify all of it. So look very carefully. Isn't all this stuff raised to the -2? So this is -3 to the first power, x squared. Raising powers to a power, and you multiply the powers. So you have -3 raised to the -2. Correct? We have x to the -4 on top, right? Then we have times 4 times x, y to the 5th. Let's reorder it, just focusing on the top. So let's do -3 raised to the -2, and then times 4. Are we all good? And then x to the -4. This is an x to the 1st, correct? So I'm just reordering it, y to the 5th. Continuing to simplify the top. Let's all type this part into our calculator, okay? I'm going to put a line here. So we have, because this is takes a little bit advanced thinking. You have to use parentheses. Go parentheses. -3 raised to the 2nd power is +9. Nope, sorry. It's -2. -3 raised to the -2. You get a decimal, hit math, enter. You get 1/9, correct? So we have a 1 on top and a 9 on bottom. We have a 4 on top. So isn't this going to be 1 times 4? Does everybody see how I did that? Okay, took care of those. When you multiply, you add. So won't that be x to the -3? And then y to the 5th. Okay, we just simplified the top. So I can go like this. Okay, now I can focus on the bottom. There's nothing to simplify. So we have 9 times 81 times x cubed times y to the -2. Okay, let's simplify the numbers. Just use your calculator. So we have 4 over 9 times 81. So do 4 divided by parentheses 9 times 81. Or I'm just going to multiply 9 to 81 and write that number down. Let's do that. 9 times 81. 729, correct? So we have 4 over 729. Let's see if that simplifies. 4 divided by 729. Math, enter. Nope. Then we have the x's. When you divide, then you subtract. Careful, don't just say those divide out. Be really careful. We're subtracting the top from the bottom. So if you need to go off to the side, say -3 minus, and then look at the bottom, 3, which is -6, guys, right? So that's on top right now. Then when you divide, then you subtract. Be really careful, guys. Don't miss minusing a negative. So look at the top. Don't ignore the bottom. Say, I know I divide, so I subtract. It's 5 minus. Now look at the bottom. -2. So won't that be +2? 7. So we have y to the 7th. Now we know this is almost our final answer. We have 1x, 1y. We have a number. We're good. We just flip anything with a negative exponent. Flip that down to the bottom, and that's going to become positive. So there's still a 4 on top. There's still a y to the 7th on top. On bottom, there's 729 and x to the +6. They're going to be that hard. But you can do it. I know you can. Just think of it in pieces like I just thought through it with you. Don't second guess yourself. Okay, we're good? Okay. Here we go. Everybody, I want you to just do this with your calculator. So here we go. You have to use parentheses. Go parentheses. 3 divided by 2. And close your parentheses. So this is what you should be typing in your calculator. 3 divided by 2. Close your parentheses. Divided by. So hit divided by. And then you'll do another parenthesis. 4 divided by 5. But you've got to use parentheses. What the heck? What'd you get? Yeah, that's right. 15 over 8. Did you all get that? If not, I want to help you with your calculator, yeah? Okay. Okay, so you have to change it back to a fraction. We always want our final answers in the simplified fraction. You couldn't figure it out? Okay, you're going to need to get a TI-83. You can try to get mine today, use mine. Okay. Okay, look at this one, guys. We had 2 divided by 5 raised to the negative 2. There's one like this. Let's just use our calculator. Parentheses, 2 divided by 5. Close your parentheses. Raised to the negative 2. You get a decimal. We change it back to a fraction. Yep. Let's say you didn't have, let's say you didn't have a graphing calculator. That's 2 raised to the negative 2 over 5 raised to the negative 2. Wouldn't we flip both of these since they're negative exponents? Yeah. So it'll be 5 squared on top, 2 squared on bottom. 5 squared is 5 times 5, which is 25. 2 squared is 4. Do you see where we got it without the calculator? Yeah. I don't care if you can get the correct answer. I don't care how you get it. Okay, here we go. GCF. That's the next thing you're going to see on the test. So you're going to do the properties of exponents and the simplifying, and you're going to get the greatest common factor. So you've got to be really careful. Make sure you pull out the greatest thing. 8x squared y minus 20xy squared. So do they both divide by 2? They do, but let's see. 4? 4. Okay, we'll pull out a 4. There's something more. This has an x, this has 2 x's, so let's pull out 1x, correct? This has a y, this has a y squared, we'll pull out a y. You guys, please write that and then go back and divide. It's just worth it to write it and get it right. But make sure what people do is they'll skip right to the dividing and then they'll pretend like that wasn't there. We pulled it out. You have to write it. You get what I'm saying? Okay, so let's divide it in pieces, guys. 8 over 4 is 2, correct? X squared over x is x. Y over y is 1. Don't say 0, it's 1. Then negative 20 divided by 4 is negative 5. X over x is 1. Y squared over y is y. Now look in your parentheses. If there's nothing more to pull out, you've done it correctly. Does everybody see how we can say 2x, 5y, nothing more? Okay, that'd be our answer. GCF. We factored out the greatest common factor, we're done. Yes, because 2 times x times 1 is just 2x. Okay, let's look at this one. GCF, factor out the GCF. So first of all, I want you to notice something. Negative in front. This is the time you have to factor out a negative, correct? Only if it's in front. Okay, 2, correct? We'll factor out a negative 2 because of the negative in front. X, x squared, x cubed. Yep, they all have an x. But this, okay, so careful though. Y to the 10th, y cubed, y squared. Should we just, so we pull out y squared. Okay, we're all good? Okay, go back, divide each. Just, it's worth it to get it right. Don't miss when you go back and divide your signs. So go in sections and be really careful. Negative 4 divided by negative 2 is positive 2, guys. X over x is 1. Y to the 10th divided by y squared. When you divide, you subtract, right? 10 minus 2 is y to the 8th. Okay, careful. Positive 2 divided by negative 2 is negative 1, right? So I'm going to write that for now. X squared over x is x. And then y cubed over y squared is y. So we don't even have to write the negative 1, because negative 1 times anything is just itself. But if there was no xy, we'd need the negative 1, correct? Then moving on, negative 8 divided by negative 2 is positive 4. X cubed divided by x is x squared. Y squared over y squared is 1. Look inside your parentheses, nothing more we can pull out. Because look, yeah, this is a 2 and this has a 2. But did that have a 2? No. It has to be in all terms. We're all good with that? Okay, sweet. I'm going to show this one. Okay. Okay, we're still way good on time. Here we go. Next thing you're going to see on the test. Okay, if I said factor out the GCF, let's just quickly look at this one. Well, in the numbers, what would we factor out? 7. Wouldn't we factor out negative 7? Yeah. Okay, x, right? Yeah. Y, yeah. Z. Yeah. Okay, we're good. Moving on. Then you go back and divide, but I'm not going to keep going. Factor completely. Does anyone know what kind of factoring we're doing here? What? Good. Grouping. Look, everybody, if this is factored completely, you got to know what kind of factoring. Well, if there's 1, 2, 3, 4 terms, we factor by grouping. Group the first 2 terms, group the second 2 terms, including the sign. I really should have went like this. And now factor out the greatest thing in each group. What's the greatest thing in common? And 6x, so divide by 6x, divide by 6x. So careful here, 12 divided by 6 is 2, x squared over x is x, y. Now right here, don't say that goes away, please. It becomes a 1, correct? Then right here, what's the greatest thing in common? So we'll pull it up, and we're pulling out positive 4. So write it like this, positive 4, divide by 4, divide by 4, so that's a 2xy plus 1. If you've done it correctly, your safe haven will be the same. Now factor that out, 2xy plus 1. Factor out what's in parentheses, so then it divided out once you factor it out, right? Left is 6x plus 4. Everybody comfortable? You know you're done when you have 2 linear factors, or 2 factors, yes. If it's, good question. See how this one had 4 terms? We wouldn't do the quadratic. Oh, sorry, I had to sneeze. That was crazy. This, right here, this factor. Nope, factor means stop at factoring, not solve it. Good question. Okay, this is, look, I'm just going to say factor on the test. You say to yourself, what kind of factoring? Well, it's quadratic, correct? So then we say, okay, we know this is a times c adds up to be b. Well, multiplies to be 1 times negative 27 and adds up to be negative 6. 9 times 3, correct? Negative 9, positive 3, because negative 9 plus 3 equals negative 6. Is everybody good? Now, we can quick factor this one because this is a 1. There's going to be a couple, 1 quick factoring and then 2 long factoring. So can't we just know that this factors to be x minus 9 times x plus 3? We're not solving it, it's this factor. So didn't we do that? We're done. Okay, let's do a long factoring one. Now look, once again, it says factor. You say, what kind of factoring am I looking at? Oh, quadratic, there's not 4 terms, so I just must be factoring it. A times c adds up to be b. What multiplies to be negative 10, right? 5 times negative 2. Won't that be 5 times 2, negative 5 plus 2, guys? Now do not quick factor this. Your a value is 5, so you have to drop 5x squared, negative 2, and you break down the middle term as those 2 factors with an x, so negative 5x plus 2x, correct? Group these 2 terms, group these 2 terms. The greatest thing in common here is 5x. Left is x minus 1. In common here is a positive 2. X minus 1. We know we've done it correctly. We're not done though, right? But we know our safe haven is the same, so we factor it out. So then left is 5x plus 2. Okay. We're all good? So if I said, okay, we're all good. There's going to be 2 long factoring. Get them right. Okay, next one on the test, on the second page of the test. I'm going to give you a picture like this. Say find sine, cosine, tangent. So looking at this, we would say to ourselves, sine of theta, cosine theta, tangent theta. Oh heck, another hour of agony. Okay, look right here. So sine is opposite and hypotenuse. So 6 over 12, right? Which is 1/2, correct? Cosine is adjacent. Oh crap, we don't have adjacent. Can't we use the Pythagorean theorem? You will have to on the test. Make sure you do it right. Side 1 squared plus side 2 squared is equal to the hypotenuse squared. So side 1 squared, question mark squared plus side 2 squared is 6 squared is equal to 12 squared, correct? So question mark squared is equal to, so I'm going to subtract 36, right? I'm skipping steps. So we have 144 minus 36, correct? 108, then we'll square root it. So question mark is equal to, you type it into your calculator. If it comes out even, you're good. If it comes out a decimal, you have to do it by hand. It comes out a decimal. So we break it down by hand. So take your calculator, 108 divided by 2. 54. 2 times 54, factors of 54. 2 and 27. And then 9 and 3, right? 9 and 3. 3 and 3. Pulling out groups of 2. We pull out a 2, we pull out a 3. Isn't that left?
Yeah.
So 6 square roots of 3. Is everybody good with that? So this is 6 square roots of 3. Okay, continue. Now we can continue. Cosine is adjacent, which is 6 square roots of 3 over hypotenuse, which is 12. Can't we divide 6 and 12?
Yeah.
Yes, right? Because it's multiplication. So that's square root of 3 over 2, because 1 over 2, correct? And opposite over adjacent. Opposite 6 over adjacent, which is 6 square roots of 3. Won't that become, don't say that becomes square roots of 3, guys. Use your mind, use algebra. That's 1 and a 1. So won't it be 1 over the square root of 3? Is that answer acceptable? So we'll rationalize it. We'll multiply by the square root of 3 over the square root of 3. 1 times the square root of 3 on top is the square root of 3. On bottom we have the square root of 9, which is 3. There's tangent. There's cosine, there's sine. We're all good? Yep. Okay, next one. Find theta. That's the next one on the test. Find theta. Okay, we've got to set up a trig ratio, correct? We have adjacent and hypotenuse. Which one uses that? Adjacent and hypotenuse, isn't it cosine? So cosine of theta is equal to adjacent, another hour. So we have cosine of theta is equal to, you got to do it correctly, adjacent is 3 over 5. Now theta is trapped inside cosine, correct? We're trying to find an angle. This is the only time, if you're trying to find an angle, you'll take the cosine inverse. Inverse and cosine cancel out. We have theta is equal to cosine inverse of 3/5. You'll use your calculator, make sure it's in degree mode. So you do second cosine, because that'll give you the inverse to 3 divided by 5. Hit enter, you get 53.13 degrees. Good? Okay. Next one on the test, find x. Oh, can we use Pythagorean theorem? No. There's one like this on the test. Are we ready? So we can't use Pythagorean theorem, correct? So we'd say we must be using right triangle trig, so we'll use that theta. Adjacent and hypotenuse, isn't that cosine again? So we know cosine of theta is equal to adjacent over hypotenuse. Plug in what you know. Cosine of 25 is equal to adjacent, which is x, over hypotenuse, which is 13.2. Solve for x. Good, because this is on bottom, we'll multiply both sides by what's on bottom. Now, isn't x alone? Yes. Yeah, well, if x was on bottom, we'd multiply by x, right? And then you'd have x cosine of 25. How do you want to do multiplication, division? So then you divide by cosine of 25. Does that make sense? You're just doing your algebra. So 11.96. If I said round to the nearest round to the nearest tenth, then this rounds up to 12, correct? Because 9 rounding up would 6, round 9 up, which rounds that up. Are we all good? Next thing on the test, we'll say in words, describe the transformations. We're almost done, okay? In words, describe the transformations. So this one is right to, up to. Oh, that's 1/2. 1/2 is less than 1, so it's a compression, correct? So you'd say compression of 1/2. We're all good with that? Okay, let's describe the words, the shift in this one. So left 1, down 5, and then, oh, the negative doesn't affect the stretch or compression. It's a 4, so stretch of 4. And then we have a reflection over x. Are we all good? Yes. Stretch, and it is a slope, you're right, but it's still considered a stretch. In words, describing it. If we're describing it, if we were graphing it, we do it, it is a slope, but it's also considered a stretch. Or compression. Does that make sense? Okay. Next one. Don't let something like this throw you off. Let's describe the transformation. Any shift left and right? No. Nope. So we're just going down 4, correct? And reflection over x. Okay, I don't want to write that. Are we all good? Okay, it says solve for k. Oh yeah, we will have to be able to graph some of those. So just remember that these are used, quadratics are used, right? And these absolute values are v's. Domain and range, you've got to know it. We don't have time to go over it. But I think we're good with those, right? Oh, if I said what's the axis of symmetry, wouldn't it just be x equals whatever that vertex is at? Okay. Next thing, solve for k. So this is a literal equation. This is on the last page of the test. Solve for k. How would we get k alone? Add 5x squared, correct, guys? So we have 2k is equal to 5x squared plus 13y. We're trying to get k alone. So when we divide by 2, and we're done. Right? Isn't there nothing more we can do here? The literal equation. Okay, here we go. Solve for x. There will be one like this on the test. Uh-oh, we have 2 x's. Does anyone remember what we did? Yes, but we have to first get everything with an x to one side and everything else to the other side, right? So I'm going to minus 4 from both sides. So I have 14xy is equal to negative 2x minus 4. I got to bring the x's on one side, so I'm going to add 2x. Is everybody good with that? So we have 14xy plus 2x is equal to negative 4. How do we get, so now we'll factor out the greatest common factor. So there's a 2x in common. We'll factor out 2x. Left is 7y plus 1, correct? Because 14 divided by 2 is 7. And is equal to negative 4, correct? We're trying to get x alone. So won't we divide by a 2 and a 7y plus 1? Divide by 2 and 7y plus 1. So those divide out. Those divide out isn't x alone. We have x is equal to negative 4 over 2 times 7y plus 1. Now, multiplication can be simplified. If it needs to simplify more, do. 4 over 2 is negative 2, correct? So we have a negative 2 on top, and on bottom we have 7y plus 1. Does that make sense? 4 over 2, 2 over 1. So negative 2 on top. 1 times 7y plus 1 is just 7y plus 1. Okay. Sometimes they won't simplify, yeah. Okay, so also, what if I had this as an answer? 2a minus z all over 4. Can I divide those out? No, right? No. Z is not divided, because z is also divided by 4, right? Remember not to do that. We're all good? Okay. Okay, solve by factoring. So this one is solved by factoring. So we factor it, set it equal to 0, solve. Can we all do that? Do I need to go through it? You sure? Could we quick factor? No. We'd long factor, set it equal to 0, and solve. If I said solve however, let's solve this the easy way. There's no bx, right? So wouldn't we just isolate x squared? Add 9, so we have 4x squared is equal to 9. Then divide by 4. You have x squared is equal to 9 over 4. Take your calculator. Do 9 divided by 4. Hit math, enter, enter. It doesn't simplify, so we have 9 over 4. Next step is to take the square root. Root cancels out with power. We have x is equal to. Do not, if you're solving using this method, forget the plus and minus. We have to split it up. The square root of 9 over the square root of 4. What is the square root of 9? What's the square root of 4? So our answers would be x is equal to plus and minus 3/2, correct? 2 answers. There's degree 2. It better have 2 answers. Yes. Well, because root, we square rooted both sides, right? Look, root cancels out with power, right? That would leave x. Because it's x squared. If you take the square root of that, root cancels out with power. We're solving. Yeah. Okay. Solve however. Look at it, guys. Look with me. Solve however. Let's see if it factors. Because we solve quadratics by factoring if possible. We'll multiply to be negative 4 and adds up to be 1. 1 times 4, 2 times 2. Nothing can add up to be 1. Doesn't solve by factoring, so we'll use quadratic formula. X equals negative b, which is negative 1 plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4 times a times c all over 2 times 4 all over 2a, right? So x is equal to negative 1 plus or minus the square root. Let's all type only this piece into our calculator real quick. So you have to use parentheses, so 1 squared not with this without the square root, right? You got 17? Okay. All over 8. Now you go off to the side. Say, can I simplify the square root of 17? And no, we can't. So we're done. Right? Yes. We're all good? If it can't simplify though, you gotta go off to the side, simplify it, and then if all three things divide by something, you would, right? Only if all three. X equals negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. Okay. Simplify. Complex numbers, simplify. Oh, red flag, right? Subtraction. We put a 1, distribute that in. Isn't that a negative 5? Plus 4i. Then we're just combining like terms. Negative 2 plus negative 5 is negative 7. Negative 3i plus 4i is plus 1i. Simplify. There will be one like this on the test. What would we do? Double distribute. So that's negative 6. That is plus 8i, correct? Minus, oh, careful though. That's not minus. Negative 2i times negative 3 is positive 6i, correct? Careful right here. Negative 2i times positive 4i is negative I squared. Don't forget I squared. What is I squared negative 1? So isn't that negative 8 times negative 1, which is positive 8? So now those aren't there anymore. Combine real parts with real parts. So that is 2. 8i plus 6i is plus 14i. We're all golden? Because we have to remember that I squared is equal to negative 1. So negative 8 times negative 1, because we have negative 8 times I squared. Only if it's I squared. This is where people forget that I squared is that last multiplication. Do you see how we have an I times an I? Okay, thanks for coming. You'll do good. Woo. Well, we made it just in the nick of time. That was literally every problem.